Welcome to everyone. And I think you all saw in the chat that Molly is joining us without her video on. And I welcome everybody, our speakers and all of you. I thought I would just begin with a moment of silence and a little prayer, and to keep in our minds not only the migrants who are crossing the desert right now and looking for a home, but also for the people of Ukraine, So for all those who seek home and all it means, disappear behind them for all those who cannot see a home. In the days ahead of them, for all those who dwell in daily insecurity, and for all those who are weary and without a safe place to rest their heads. For all families, we pray. May we also be blessed with compassion for those still weary, still seeking, still with so far to go. Amen. Thank you all.
Amen. Thank you.
Okay, this morning we have 3 borders. I think we might even have more. We have Arizona border with Bob and Sara, and we have Andorra, another part of Arizona, and we have Tijuana, and we have Texas. So welcome to you all. Why don't we start with Bob? And Bob, I'll just let you be in charge of Arizona, okay? The border's there. Okay, Bob?
Unmute.
I'll keep it brief, but I'll just touch on 3 areas, the desert, Nogales, and then Agua Prieta. I can speak of those. So obviously in the desert, people are still crossing. I mean, the numbers are up. Last calendar year was the highest number of human remains recovered ever recorded, 226. And those are just the ones that are found. And actually Wednesday I was in the desert and it's brutal out there. I mean, the wind was so atrocious. And then the rains came in the afternoon. So for people to be out there it's horrible. And moving to Agua Prieta, I was there last week, and every day I was there, there were over 200 migrants that passed through the resource center.
Okay, tell them about the resource center with Sister.
So the resource center is at the border of Douglas and Agua Prieta. It's literally just it's probably 200 feet from the border wall itself, and there are people there 24 hours a day to monitor the place, and migrants will come in all hours of the day and night, early morning. The buses are now coming back to Agua Prieta, so they're dropping off people in numbers 45, 35 people, and the vans still come as well. I mean, they come 2 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're bringing people from all over the border. There was, Sister Judy sent me an email on Wednesday and said that they had received a busload of people from Sonora. So, and those people have been in the desert for long periods of time. So the resource center, and of course, thanks to Loretto, they've been supported by Loretto, which is wonderful. And in Douglas, it's even colder. When I was down there last week, the wind was just every morning it just blew, and it was so cold that on the table where they serve coffee and hot chocolate, the cup with the spoons there was a layer of ice on top. It was that cold. It was that cold. And I was able to help several men with blister care, knee care, ankle care, wound care. Took out a lot of cactus spines from people that were out there, traveling at night and couldn't see and ran into cactus. And one of the policy things that's really horrific there is oftentimes when they load people on the buses or the vans, they'll say that you can only have one layer of clothing. So it could either be a shirt or oftentimes, because I saw these men with just jackets and no shirt. I said, what's that? And they said, well, they said we can only have one layer of clothing. So they had to take off, they had to decide, what am I going to wear? And then they're transported on these buses and vans that are air conditioned. So, that's horrible. And the last day I was there, at about 11:30 in the morning, I was preparing to leave. I was working with the sisters from Mexico there. And this gentleman came in that was being helped by his friend. He could not walk. He could not walk. He sat down and he just started sobbing. He was in such an excruciating pain. He had twisted his knee really, really bad. So we had to call Red Cross and they came. When the sister called, I mean, they were there in 5 minutes. And then they put him on the ambulance and took him to the hospital. So he can stay at the shelter to recoup, but to be sent back like that, there's no excuse for that. That should never have happened. But that's policy, and each individual agent has so much power out there that they can dictate this policy. So I'll end in Nogales because I want to end on a really positive note. So as far as the numbers of the migrants at the Comodoro are down, but they fluctuate. I was there on Monday, and our numbers for the clinic actually had increased on Monday, and slowly they're starting to allow more people to stay at the shelter itself. So I think right now there are 25 to 30 people that are staying there on a full-time basis. And I'm going to end the really, really wonderful thing is that the KBI in the Comodoro now has a doctor on staff.
Oh, good.
He is there Monday through Friday. Wonderful, wonderful guy from a young man. I think he's 38 from Sinaloa. He's been in Nogales for just over a year, but he's terrific. And it was wonderful working with him on Monday. Because it's so great, to have somebody to fall back on, and when you have questions about health issues, and then to be able to write prescriptions for antibiotics or whatever else the folks may need. But he's really focused on education for the migrants, on education about their health care and about their health. His first pamphlet that he created was for the men. He said, because here in Mexico, the men think that they're pretty tough, he said, but he says, I know otherwise. So he says they need to know about the health, taking care of themselves. So I'll end with that, but it's so wonderful to have him there. He's a great guy, and he loves the kids. He's a great sense of humor, and he plays with the children. The staff loves him, and the volunteers think he's just great. So Dora, do you want to talk? And then Sato, please, we'll end with you.
Thank you, Bud. I'm dealing with I'm having some donations to be dropped off, so I had to open the gate real quick. As you can see, this is a teamwork, and I am so honored to be part of this team. Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. And thank you, Bud. That is the report we all probably have in all our borders. They're pretty similar of the cruelty of our people and what happened to them, their own stories every single day. So as some of you might know, and some of you don't know about our new resource center in Sasabe, Sonora. And this is my church. It's called Casa Esperanza. We got to wear that proud because it's been a coalition of people working together to make this happen. And it's consistent, it's wonderful. And I really want to make a big announce of the great things that people accomplish for us, like Bob just got a grant for us for medical supplies. And thank you so much. We know our people is going to, have a good take care of that. And we not hire, but we encourage a local women who will be helping us with the medical needs. Also, I want to say thank you so much for each of you who have been able to support us in the Laredo community and this wonderful team with donations for our center. The food money that came in has been nothing but blessings because people can have daily meals. So our resource center, for those that don't know, it was initiation because we saw a need in the community. And the need was that our migrants were being deported in that area where it's very, very remote. It has no medical help. I mean, I'm sorry, my dog. I'm so sorry. Let me get that dog out. I'm so sorry.
We all know what that's like. To have a dog that wow.
Can I take a minute to wish Marcella a happy birthday?
Oh, yeah. Birthday greetings.
We could sing to her. Happy birthday to
To
you.
you. Happy
Happy
birthday
birthday
to you.
Happy birthday, dear Marcella.
Sorry, I was telling you guys that.
Happy birthday to you.
Let me pick up like that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Dora, we can't hear you.
I think I was just mentioning, that being thankful for the grace that we have received from this community and how much of a difference it's making in the life of so many. Mary Jean is so sweet and she told me, well, I wish I can be there. And I said, well, what you guys are doing is amazing. And we all need that, right? We all need that support. Bob and I were talking that we can have the biggest heart to do this work, but without finances, we can't. We can provide help. So Casa Esperanza has been, she has been feeding over 400 people a month. And for that community, they has nothing. That community has no shelter, no hospital, no public transportation for our migrants. So when they get deported, they are pretty much lost. They don't know where to go. And most of them are from Guatemala and the indigenous from Guatemala. So it's really hard because sometimes they don't even speak the language. I mean, Spanish even. So we had to kind of be creative, how to communicate with them and see what their needs are. But we are feeding not only people who have been deported, which is every single day, 7 days a week. People is getting deported, and sometimes they have a very high medical needs. And since we don't have a hospital or a doctor, I mean, there's one local doctor, but he's private and charges a lot of money. And who has the money for that at that moment? So we are able to partnership with this woman across the street that I was mentioning that has a medical background, or ladies who are present at the center every single day. They just go and grab her and say, we have someone who needs help with their feet, with their ankle, with bruises, with their hydration. So it is great to have that partnership. So we are able to feed and provide shower for our migrants, as we have said before. Bob was saying, and it's true that it has been so cold in our area, and for us, they are in those borders very often a week. It's just heartbreaking because, I mean, we love the snow and it's beautiful in the mountains, but we also know that it's one of our brothers or sisters in those areas. They are suffering or maybe dying of hypothermia. We see them come back to our center when they get deported for being 5 days in the desert, and they are in really bad shape. So we're thankful that we're present, that we are there 7 days a week from 9 to 5. There's local women who are at the front line of running this place. And we as an organization give them some financial support so they help their families also. And I can tell you, they're amazing. They're guerreras. I call them these guerreras. That means my warriors. I cannot do this without each of them. They're amazing. And they care. They care for our people. They care for our migrants. And they're also, in a happy note, the Resource Center has created a community in Sasabe, which, Sasabe, Sonora is a town of 2,500 people, locals, and there is nothing in there. There's no outlets for the children to go play. They have a plaza with no playground, but we're working on that. and then the women, the embroidery women, is run by the local person, the local women who works at the center. She has been able to gather 20 women who meet twice a week to embroidery, to do this beautiful work, beautiful art at the center. So they talk, they have coffee. When, last year by this time, they did not have that center because we opened May 1st of 2021. And we're coming closer to our anniversary, so mark the date. But I will stop that because I know we have more people, and I just one more time want to really appreciate you, each of you, and tell you it doesn't matter where you are, your donations go straight to our needs, and we're thankful. We're just thankful to be part of this amazing group. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Dora. Sara?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Bob, for letting me join this call and speak. And Bob asked if I would share a little bit about my experience working as a volunteer at Kino Border Initiative at the Comodore and also the albergue, the shelter. So I'll just take a couple minutes to reflect with you all on that. But it would be remiss of me if I didn't start by saying that this reflection actually starts with another person in this room, Sister Anna Koop, who's down there on my screen. And she probably doesn't even know this. Because when I was a freshman in college, Sister Anna was so kind as to let me spend a summer living at the Denver Catholic Worker. And at the time, I didn't know who Dorothy Day was. I knew nothing about the Catholic Worker. And I took the experience rather hard. And she probably had no idea what a seed that she planted and how it has matured into now caring about this work and studying about this. So I'm very grateful that she's on this call. I think 6 or 7 years later. Hey there. She is just such a wonderful example of accompaniment and entering into solidarity and sitting with people in their suffering and not trying to fix anything, but meet them where they're at and being present to that, which I think is also at the heart of what Kino is doing at the Comodore and in the shelter space there. I've spent 8 months there during the pandemic, and then this last Christmas as well as a volunteer. And it's one of those places where people ask, well, what do you do every day? And you never have a good answer because the work changes and the work is also a ministry of presence. So normally my response is something along the lines of, I don't really know what we do, but it feels really good to be in that space. And it feels like we aren't really doing anything out of a sense of transactional charity or even a kind of a noble principle of justice alone, but this is the response of what it looks like to belong to each other in deep and meaningful ways. And belonging to each other in those deep and meaningful ways looks different daily. Sometimes it looks like playing with children in the shelter, and sometimes it means washing these really big pots that are filled with kilos of beans or rice. But a lot of times belonging to each other and the work that Kino does looks like listening while we all sort beans and joke that they've already been washed and pre-washed and we're sorting them for like a third time. But we just chat, and then those conversations and that work then leads to other conversations with women in the shelter about later in the evening. They'll tell you how difficult it is for them to fall asleep or to have a restful night's sleep, or to be able to feel a sense of security. I think in my time there, it has been just such a privilege to be in those spaces and to learn from these real examples of grace and of resilience. Migrants are just like you and me and our sisters and our brothers, and have good days and bad days like you and me. But I have been shown just such a tenderness in working with and alongside them. And I was thinking about one story in particular of a young Honduran woman, Dinia, who was in the shelter, and mother of 2 kids, and another volunteer from the U.S. had come over to converse with us and was sharing how disappointed she felt that she had just recently received a rejection from a job she had applied to. This was her, post college, kind of entering into the job world, classic rejection. And Dinia, this young woman in the shelter, begins to cry. And my thought is, it's part of life. You'll get over it, learning process. And Dinia, who does not have a degree like this educated young woman does not have even paperwork, is so moved by compassion to cry for this U.S. young woman volunteer. It was just such a tenderness. And she says, I know what it feels like to be unwanted. It was just staggering. And that's every day being surprised and just so moved and knowing the privilege that it is. And it's also a wonderful privilege to watch women, particularly women in the shelter, grow into themselves. This happens a lot faster with the children. Bob can attest to that, how children will open up in this safe environment that Kino volunteers and staff provide. We see Angelica, who was immobile when she first came in, to wanting to cook tamales for everybody, or Josefina taking on this de facto role of mother of everybody in the shelter, or a young man who never talked before now interrupts the Sunday celebración de la palabra to ask a question. It's just so beautiful and so dignifying, and it's such a privilege to learn from migrants, because there's this vulnerability and this extreme resilience, and they're always in tension. And I think that categorizes well the borderland space. And I'll close with that the borderland is this place in tension. There's so much to celebrate, and then there's so much suffering. Bob and I have spoken on this. The desert is this horrific labyrinth that is death dealing. And you see that when you walk in it. You feel it when you're stung by the wind, and your face, you can't close your fingers because it hurts your fingers with the wind and the lack of air or the lack of moisture. And then it's also really beautiful. It's a beautiful desert. And I think that never gets resolved. And just as policy isn't getting resolved there, and we are invited to live in that tension. And I'm no longer at Kino. I came back to school. I'm here in Atlanta right now. And I really miss it. I really miss the comedor and the shelter. I miss Bob and the migrants. But I just miss that kind of hope that the migrants live with, kind of that deep conviction that this is what it means to live a good life, and we're invited to partake in that and bear witness to that in that suffering. And it comes down to a question of belonging to each other. And that's something we can all carry with us. That's ultimately something I think very hopeful. I'll close with that. Thank you again, Bob, for letting me share.
Thank you, Sara, very much. It was very beautiful. And we're glad you shared.
Thank you, Mary Jean.
Okay. Any questions for the Arizona border? And then we'll move on to Tijuana and Texas. For anyone.
I'm just really curious about the reality that those people have been denied clothing and are coming on air-conditioned buses. How common knowledge is that? And if it isn't common knowledge, how do we get it out there? Because that is
Cruel.
inhumane, among other inhumanities.
It's common knowledge. I mean, that's what I mean. Each individual agent has so much power. They can choose to do what they want to do with a migrant or migrants that they encounter. So no, but that's policy. And I had a young gentleman in our Prieta tell me about he and his friend were out there with a group and how they were abused by one agent. He said the gentleman was swearing at them. He said he threw a couple people down on the ground and telling people, go back to your own country, don't come here. While other agents stood around and allowed this to happen. So this stuff is very well known.
I just want to say to Sarah, what I take home from all that you shared is that beautiful expression, belonging to one another. It's just very touching, real, and how we all need to keep trying to be. So thank you for that, Sarah, and thank you for that summer at the worker too.
Okay, let's move on to Tijuana with Paulina. Paulina is the directora of Espacio Migrante, a shelter right on the border of Tijuana and San Diego.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mary Jean, for the space to share. And it's always great to see the great work of Robert and Dora. And thank you, Sarah, for sharing that beautiful testimony. In Tijuana, in Espacio Migrante, we started the year with Omicron variant. So unfortunately, half of our team and the families at the shelter got sick. So January and part of February, we have been dealing with that. But now people are out of COVID, they're safe. So now we're ready to start taking in new families because we had to stop taking new families and isolate everybody. And luckily now in Tijuana, there's vaccination campaigns that happen but they're not always available. So our staff is fully vaccinated, but usually when new families come in, they're not vaccinated. And we just try to pay attention when there's campaigns to take the residents and to spread information about vaccination. But that has been a challenge since the pandemic. Also, in 2021, last year, we saw an increase of Mexican families, especially from Michoacan and Guerrero. And another thing is that we saw a lot of large families with grandma, grandparents, uncles, aunts, everybody leaving their home. We even had a family of 16 members that was with us. And in December and January, we saw a big arrival of Haitian families as well. We were waiting for Haitian families to arrive because we were following the news, but we didn't see a large arrival until December. And it's a tough situation because shelters are overcrowded, and shelters are doing a very important work, but we just don't have enough housing spaces for all the people that are in Tijuana. People keep getting returned to Tijuana through Title 42, and people continue to arrive. So what we have seen is that most of migrants are not in shelters. We are located in the center of Tijuana, in downtown. And outside of our shelter, we just see a lot of people that are in homeless situation, a lot of Haitian population, African population. And some people are also renting rooms in hotel rooms or small apartments, but they have to share like 10 people maybe to rent one apartment. So these places are overcrowded. And this is why we also decided to focus our work outside the shelter. And thanks to the support of Loreto, we were able to strengthen our Comunidades program. So before, we used to have one community organizer. She's a young Salvadorian woman who used to live at our shelter. Then she became involved as a volunteer, and then she became an organizer with us. And last year, we were able to hire also Josiane, who is a Cameroonian woman. And she helps us to connect with the African communities in Tijuana. We see a lot of people from Cameroon, Ghana, and other African countries, and she speaks English and French, so that's really helpful for us. And we also have two Haitian organizers. They are twin sisters and students. They go to school in the morning, and then they work half-time with us. So thanks to Loreto, we were able to hire these 3 new organizers. And our big focus has been food and then information. So last year, we were able to deliver 126 cash assistance cards. And these cards, they can use them at the supermarket to buy what is most urgent for them. So it can be food or medicine or diapers, depending on what they need. But we don't always get funding to buy these cards. So we also take in-kind donations. Last year, we focused a lot on information sessions, like Know Your Rights sessions. And we were able to reach about 3,000 people and give them information, also information in their languages, because we have a very diverse migrant community now. People who speak Haitian Creole, French, English. So we made sure to print flyers in different languages. The organizers did a great job at this. And in January 1st is Haiti's Independence Day. So we partner with a Haitian restaurant to serve 200 plates of warm food, warm soup. It's a special soup that they do for Independence Day, the soup jumu. And we were able to share information and donations. A positive thing that we started doing is partnering with restaurants owned by migrants. So for example, every time we had an action, like going to the El Chaparral camp or to a shelter, instead of us just cooking the food, we partner with Haitian restaurants, and they also help us to cook the food and to provide the food. And we're also working with two amazing women. One is Doña Esther. She's a deported woman, a Mexican woman from Oaxaca, who was deported, and she started a tamaleria, a tamal restaurant. So she also cooks food every couple of weeks and takes it to shelters. And so she was a partner in this. And also Lilian Mejia, she's a Honduran woman, and she has a Honduran restaurant. So she's also supporting her community. So we just saw that these restaurants are great partners because they're a place where those communities gather and come together. And so whenever we need to spread information, we go on and pass out flyers at the restaurants. So it's just been a great teamwork. But also other challenges that we've had is the policies that continue to be in place. First, last year, there was a lot of misinformation because people in MPP were being processed, but all the people who didn't qualify for MPP, such as Mexican asylum seekers, Haitians, Africans, they were really confused about what was going to happen to their asylum cases or when they were going to present themselves to the border. And so we saw organized crime and coyotes taking advantage of this misinformation. A lot of people getting calls from people pretending to be attorneys or pretending to be organizations like us, but charging people for services that we would give for free. So that was really hard because we tried to fight misinformation, but people really don't know what to believe. And if they see a hope, that if somebody says, we're going to help your family cross, it's easy for them to fall into that. And so that was one of our challenges. And now we see that MPP is coming back, but not only that, now it's expanding to include people from Haiti as well. So we see this with concern because we know that for migrants who don't speak Spanish and Black migrants, they struggle in Tijuana because the language barrier, and also there is discrimination in Mexico too. And also Tijuana continues to be a violent city, even for Tijuana residents like our team, but also for migrants. In December, we had 2 migrants who were shot, one from Cameroon and one for Haiti because of crime in Tijuana. And so it's really sad that these people are forced to wait in Tijuana because it's not a safe place for them. And also, one of our concerns is also the lack of access to rights in Mexico. So especially healthcare, because if people can't have access to healthcare in the middle of a pandemic, then it can be something of life or death. So we see a lot of pregnant women that, especially Haitian women that are trying to access healthcare, and hospitals are also focusing a lot on COVID, but they fail to provide migrants with information. Sometimes they reject them. Luckily, next to us, we have a wonderful clinic, which is run by Refugee Health Alliance, and they give free services to migrant population. But again, it's not enough for so many people that are in Tijuana. Also, mental health continues to be another challenge because of this uncertainty that people are waiting waiting for such a long period without knowing what is going to happen to their cases. Some families have been waiting. We have one family in our shelter, a mom with her daughter from Mexico, and they have been with us for 2 years because they were on the waiting list when the pandemic started, and the border is still closed for her. So this has an impact on mental health. And if there's already few mental health services in Tijuana for migrants that are accessible, there is none for migrants that don't speak Spanish. So when Mary Jean and Marcela and Sally visited Espacio, I shared a story of a Haitian man who was homeless, and he was sleeping outside Espacio Migrante, but he was suffering mental health crisis. And we tried to give him food, blanket. And one morning he had a crisis. He was yelling because he was feeling very desperate. Somebody called the police. Instead of calling a psychologist or finding help, somebody called the police, and the police came in 5 minutes and just started beating him up and took him. So we felt very desperate because there wasn't much we could do. He was released 2 days later, but he was even missing a tooth, and he had been beat up. And we felt desperate because we don't have a psychologist. There's really nothing that we felt we could do. And we only received families. But it was beautiful because our organizer, Josiane, she's Cameroonian, she was able to win his trust, and he didn't want to speak to any of us when we tried to offer water or anything, but for some reason he felt a good connection with her, so she slowly started getting close to him. Also, other Haitians in Tijuana were looking out for him, and she was in communication with him, and now he's more stable. He was able to shower, find a place that other Haitians helped him to rent, and he visited us a few weeks ago, and he was looking more stable, more calm. But it's just, we know that mental health is an issue. We were able to get support from Loreto Sisters to have a small mental health support. So we have been able to support some migrants with psychiatrist appointment, or one migrant in particular from Burkina Faso, and also his medications. But we want to keep, in case of other emergencies like that, to have that. And also I'm going to share here in the chat. We are very proud because in December we published a report about migrants in Tijuana, the impact of COVID, and their access to rights in Mexico. And we're happy for this because there's really not a lot of information about the conditions of asylum seekers as they're waiting in Tijuana. And so you can see this report is in English, and we continue to do surveys. We're partnering with UCSD, so we can continue collecting these stories and data about the conditions of migrants. And also, to end on like a positive note, this year we're partnering with a local high school that is a few blocks from our community center. And this high school, secundaria, high school, has a lot of students, a lot of families that are migrants. They're located really close to the border. They have a lot of students from Central America, some Haitian families, and we're gonna start an after-school program to have computer classes and art classes. And this is in partnership with another organization that is providing the volunteers, and we're providing the space so that we can make this happen. And also right now, tomorrow, Saturday, we're having a workshop with women because we're getting ready for March. Is an important month for us because it's Women's International Day. In 2020, we were able to take a group of women from the shelter to the Women's March in Tijuana, which is important because women in Tijuana are fighting for their rights in Latin America. But migrant women wanted to also raise their voices and talk about their issues. And this year, we're going to have workshops and have different virtual stories on social media, since the pandemic is still happening. But it's a good way for us to also connect with women and continue to work closely with them. So that's all on my part. And again, thank you so much to all the support from Loreto.
Okay, Paulina, just do very quickly what happened in El Chaparral. Your Sada sent the pictures from the camp. But anyway, just because Loretto knows about El Chaparral, what happened there. So just say a tiny bit, and then we'll go to Texas.
So there had been an encampment in El Chaparral, which is the San Isidro, at the San Isidro port of entry. And this formed since a year ago when the processing of MPP started. And it was hundreds of families camping there, waiting for answers. And this was mostly people who weren't in MPP. And since the beginning, we raised our concerns to the Tijuana government, to the UN agencies in Tijuana, that they had to be present because these people needed information, and it was also bad conditions that they were living in because of the climate. Half of this population were small children, and also we started seeing the presence of organized crime in that area, especially coyotes taking advantage. So we really hadn't been present in El Chaparral since April or May of last year because of safety concerns for our team. And now this year in February, the camp was evicted. So on the one hand, for us, we know that the camp was a dangerous place for families, that they didn't have the right conditions, but this eviction happened in the middle of the night, and the authorities basically just evicted all the families, smashed their tents, their belongings, and what the information that we have is that they were taken to other shelters, but many families didn't want to be in shelters, and so we don't have a lot of information about where all the population is. I know some of them are in different shelters. So on the one hand, we are like, okay, finally the authorities did something, but they didn't really provide real solutions for these people because there's still no housing, there's still not enough shelters. We were not receiving new families because of COVID, but we just started last week to start receiving new families. So we're trying to keep our eyes open to see if there's families who were in El Chaparral. So, but since last year, we decided to not work directly in El Chaparral because our community organizers are migrant women, and they also felt unsafe in that space. There was a lot of issues of racism happening too, especially towards Haitians, and 3 of our organizers are Black women. So that's why we decided to do this work in other spaces, but we don't agree with what happened in the encampment.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Paulina. Okay, let's move on to Texas. All right, and one of our, Julie?
Hello. So Georgia and I are current Loretto volunteers here in El Paso. We don't really have much prepared to show
That's
you all
okay.
right now. So we're both working for legal aid clinics for migrants. I work at an organization called the Diocesan Migrant and Refugee Services as a legal assistant / caseworker. I mostly actually work with DACA recipients as well as those seeking family petitions, so family members that are in the United States that are then petitioning for family members to be able to join them. And Georgia, if you want to say a little.
Yeah, thanks, Julia. Yeah,
Hi,
I'm
Georgia.
Hi.
We're happy that both of you could squeeze us in.
Yeah, we're happy to be here. I'm a fellow Loretto volunteer, and I'm also based in El Paso. I'm working at Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center as a legal assistant. So similar to Julia, I help on like affirmative immigration applications. So I've been helping people get work permits, get residency, renew their DACA, and that kind of thing. So yeah, we didn't prepare much to share, but if anyone has like questions or things that they'd be interested in hearing about our work, I'm sure we're happy to share.
Well, I'd like to know about all three of the areas. Are any of the asylum seekers being sent to families or sponsors in the States? Or are they just being sent back to Mexico or kept there at the shelters?
So I can, like, from my experience, there
Yes.
have been some people who are like able to enter the country from MPP through humanitarian parole. Basically, we have a team of lawyers at Las Americas who work to get people who have certain like medical conditions or really pressing needs out of MPP and to await for their asylum hearing in the United States. And so some of them are able to go to relocate and to move their court to where they might have family or a community and have a little bit more stability in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than health conditions, are any of them qualified to move on with families or with sponsors? Any of the other places like Tijuana or Tucson, do you know?
I don't know that. That's
Yeah,
not really my area, but if anyone else.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
Nina?
Can you
not
repeat
much
the
is
question?
happening
Sorry.
there at Georgia in El Paso about moving families from detention centers to their families.
Yeah, there's definitely work going on to help people get out of detention centers. And I know we have a team that works exclusively with people who are in detention at Las Americas. I don't directly work with that, so I'm probably not the best person to speak to that work, but there's definitely a lot of effort to get people out of detention with their sponsor, with their families. Again, I think a lot of it is because of health reasons, like especially with COVID. That's one of the easier ways to allow people to be released is by making these kind of like health arguments. But again, I don't work with that super directly, so I'm sure there's a lot of nuance that I'm not aware of.
Okay, Dora and then Bob.
Unmute.
Here in the Tucson area, we're seeing we're seeing a large numbers of detainees being released. I participate in a chat group with Casa Salitas, which is a welcoming center in Tucson that receives people every single day from ICE, from the DHS. So the numbers are, I mean, they're exciting because every day is like 100 people being released from each of those detention centers. And they are going to families and friends or sponsors. But the situation in here is that each of those people, most of them, are wearing a bracelet and or they're being monitored by other, digital areas, and they're paying for those services. So this is the fight that we cannot stop, because they're expecting our asylum seekers to pay for this this tracking device, but they don't have a job, so they become a burden to their families right away. And we have experience and seen stories and families there from Kentucky to all those areas. They move, California and all the states, wherever their families is, they keep in touch with us, and their stories are very hard to hear because they can get a job. Their work permit will take about a year by the time they even get an application. So yes, they're being released with those conditions and to their families. So Bob, I'll give it to you.
Now, I had a question for the two of you. Do you have a sense of the numbers of people in Juarez and El Paso that are at the border, and also the population of people that are arriving there? Because the population is very different along the border. I mean, I know here in Nogales is very different than Tijuana. If you could share that would be wonderful.
Georgia or Julie?
Julia, do you have a sense?
I don't really have a sense of the numbers. I want to say it's been a lot coming from Central America, though, that have been in the shelters. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have much to add. Like I said, I haven't been working, like most of my work is with folks who have either been here for a bit longer or were just, crossed over from MPP. And so I don't have that same kind of like hands-on work that I've been hearing about from some of you, but yeah, the asylum cases that I've been working on, we've seen folks from Central America, from Brazil. We've seen some Haitian folks more recently at the border here in El Paso. So
Haitian too? Did you say Haitian? Wow.
Mhm.
Okay. Sara, you had something? Say it.
Sure. I'm just noting that here in Atlanta, we receive people who are being released or bonded out from detention centers. And we're receiving about 100 folks per week, mostly from Nicaragua or Cuba. And we aren't exactly sure how they qualify, as they report having been at detention centers in Texas before being moved without their consent or knowing it to Georgia. And then after about 5 weeks in a detention center have been released. That pattern changes so rapidly, though, that who knows if it'll stick for 2 weeks. But one of our questions has been, if Title 42 is in place, then who is processing folks? And that's something we don't have an answer to right now. But we also know that in response to Dora's comment, that a lot of people have been moved out of detention centers. I know that the detention centers here were very overcrowded. And so now they're in the process of expanding their capacity by building more beds instead of letting more
Yeah,
people.
that's not the answer. Where are they being sent though? To families and sponsors, or just going to another detention center?
When we receive them as they're released, they're heading to families.
At least.
Paulina, what about the people in Espacio Migrante? They went to families, right?
Yes. So since we are a shelter for families with small children, the people that have been able to cross is mostly because they have strong medical cases. But most people from Central America, Mexico, have family members in the U.S. But with the community outside the shelter, last year we saw a lot of folks from Africa and Haiti who didn't have sponsors. So they were struggling, but I don't know about a lot of cases who were actually in detention, just people who were looking for sponsors. And we actually tried to enroll them in a asylum seeking, it's a website to find sponsors, but it was really slow and we didn't get a lot of response. But
Thank you. Any other questions? Because I know Georgia had to hop off. Any other questions for Sarah, Bob, Paulina, Julie, or Dora?
I think Pat and I both have one.
Okay.
Pat, go first.
My question is a general one about Title 42, because I saw Mallorca interviewed on PBS, and he was asked about Title 42, and he said, because of COVID, it's the responsibility of the CDC to make sure that that is negated. I want to know whether or not that is true.
That's what he said.
Wow, I didn't see that.
I can just say what I have read. And what I have read is that DHS has imposed Title 42, even though the CDC had not recommended it in this instance. So I don't think I think he's obfuscating when he throws it back on CDC.
Okay.
Right.
I think we ought to follow up on that though, Pat. I think that's a good
Yeah.
thing.
Absolutely.
Because that, I know when El Chaparral was decimated with the bulldozers, the American Friends Service Committee said, we need to hit, or not hit, I don't know how to say it non-violently, but get rid of Title 42.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Nice.
it feels like they're just bouncing it from one to the other. Maybe
Right.
Exactly.
One
And they're
agency.
not doing anything. Yeah. Okay, Molly, I didn't see you. Any other hands up?
Yeah, Paulina had a response, I think, first, and then I'll ask mine.
Okay.
I just wanted to comment, for us, it's so unfair that Title 42 continues because when asylum seekers are processed into the US, they're usually, first, there's vaccines available in Tijuana. They get tested for COVID in Tijuana, and then once they are in San Diego as well. And right now, since November, the border was reopened for people with tourist visa. So we see that the border is open for tourism. Actually, for American tourists coming into Tijuana, that has never been closed. So we see a lot of people crossing the border, but
Back
just
and forth.
and not asylum seekers. And even right now in California, at least in San Diego, the mask mandates were lifted, but Title 42 continues. And one thing about the conditions of Title 42, when they return families back to Tijuana, these families don't even have the basic like masks. So people in the US government don't even provide them with masks. A lot of these people come and they haven't showered for days. They don't have clean clothes. So it's just really sad to see the conditions that these people are returned to the shelters. And also we see a lot of Central Americans that are immediately returned to Mexico, but a lot of Haitians are deported directly back to Haiti.
Another thing that I think
Yes, it is.
Jesse told us
I
was
agree, well,
that
thank you.
some Haitian, they weren't even Haitians,
Yes.
but Black migrants were returned to Haiti. I mean, they didn't even
Okay, but you know, is that still going to continue where we're paying about $15 or $20 more than we were before?
Molly.
See, I thought Josh was going to do something
I think
about that.
Alicia's not on.
I think she needs to mute.
Sally, do you have mute? Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay.
And Mary Jean, it looks like Dora has a comment as well about the Title 42.
Why don't you ask and then we'll go to Dora. You
Okay.
can do. Yeah.
I had a question about language access. In New York, we see a lot of migrants who speak indigenous languages from Central America and no Spanish. And I know they have a very hard time accessing any services in the US. I'm wondering if you're seeing that same issue on the border in terms of just access to basic food and shelter, if there's any like language barriers. I know Paulina obviously had mentioned Creole and French speakers.
For us, the main populations that we work with is Haitian, Central American and South American, Haitian and African. So yes, like a lot of these communities are not in shelters precisely because of language barrier and also cultural differences. A lot of Ghanaians that are in Tijuana are Muslim, and so many of them can't eat some of the food that is served at some of the kitchens or shelters. So that is one challenge. And recently, for example, we had a man from Yemen who speaks Arabic, and we're trying to look for an Arabic translator. I know that Al Otro Lado is a legal organization with attorneys, they have volunteer translators, and they work with a more diverse population, even Russian population, indigenous population. For us, it has been mostly Haitian and African, but definitely even in those languages, it's hard for us to translate information, to have, like, if any asylum seeker goes to the general hospital or to any public service in Mexico, it's only in Spanish. So I think language is one of the big challenges for sure.
Dora.
Yes, I just want to follow up with Paulina about Title 42 in our area in Sasabe, especially in Sasabe. That's the majority of our deportees that they are arrested in that area. We still continue to see mother and children from 3-year-old being deported back right away. So it's not lifted, because at the beginning of this new presidency, we were told that Title 42 was going to be lifted for mother and children and families, but that's not the case. That's still continuing full force for just anybody. And what we see, and Bob mentioned the number of deaths in our area last year, and it's due to that, because our people get tired of waiting in those very hard situations in the shelters or in the streets or in the borders, and they hire a smuggler. They hire this person, the promised land, and get him across. So they're not even working with them. They just dump them at the line of the, and then have them walked and wandered our deserts for days and days. So Title 42, we have to continue to advocate that needs to stop. It's nothing but criminal. It's nothing to do with the health department. It's nothing to do with that. It was just another deterrence from the era Trump that came really easy for him to implement. And it has been very hard for Biden to take it out. So we must raise our voices, whatever platform we have, that this is just plain criminal. This is not okay. And it's increasing the how do you say, it has increased the organized crime revenues, because they are getting rich with our people. And our migrants who have been deported back try over and over and over again. So those numbers that they're reporting as the millions of arrests are wrong, because the same person has been turned back about 6-7 times. So let's continue this fight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Our time is up, and we try to keep it to an hour. And we're the Dora, Bob, Paulina, and is that it, Sally? I'm going to give it over to Sally or Rosa right now. But I want to thank all of Loretto who joined, Alicia, Marisela, and everyone else. So because we're organizing, Rosa will tell, but I want to thank you all for joining us this morning.